Yeah, it's hard when it's more involuntary physiological stuff because we're not necessarily seeing it and we don't know. You know, we know that there's something happening, that they have a need to do that. So it's stimulating something or reinforcing. And so if possible, we want to replace it, find something we can replace it with. Or try to get rid of it by doing the counter conditioning, which would be something aversive. And see, that could be, you know, that gets a little on the you know, it can cross over into an unethical area. You know, it's like bedwetting, you know, enuresis, and they would put the bells under, and so the child would wet, and then this bell would go off, ring, 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 you know, so the child's startled because you want them to stop. You don't want them to urinate in their beds, you know, and there's people that still buy those systems, but we know now that some children's systems are underdeveloped compared to their peers. So is it ethical to employ that, you know, kind of thing? So we're still, you know, learning some of this, and some of those conditions they're more challenging, but I would recommend to parents to at least, you know, we need to get people that are professional people that have worked with those types of children before. But there may be some things that they can do that would redirect that behavior if possible. Okay. I think if there's anything more I want to say about operant conditioning, we're going to get back to it. Okay, observational learning. Just like it sounds. Learning by watching. Okay, this was Albert Bandura. And basically the premise here is that this is more vicarious learning, right? So I'm watching Belai, say I'm Belai's sister, I'm watching her. She does something and she gets in trouble for it. You know, that may be enough for me to say, you know, I'm not going to engage in that, okay? She does something, she gets a treat, okay? Then we'll see the opposite of her. So this was something that Bandura pointed out, that actually a great deal can be learned just by watching and observing. What's involved in this, though, is most definitely I need to pay attention to Belai. I have to remember, okay, and so I have to really have some type of mental representation of what it is that she did. And I have to be motivated to want to do that. So it involves what we call some cognitive elements for this to occur. Because we can learn something, we could learn it, say something in this classroom that someone's doing, and at a later time imitate it and model it. And in order for that to happen, he would say we need those elements. You have to remember it, you have to attend to it, and there has to be some incentive, some motivation for you to do it, and that's not always the case. So even though it's observational, this is where we're actually introducing some cognitive elements, we would say. Now behavior here, when we talked about behavior with Skinner, and we talked about behavior with Pavlov, we were really talking about that which was observable. Okay, well, Bandura went on to say that, you know what? Attitudes, emotional responses are also modeled. Okay, those can be modeled. So, and that's the word here we're looking for, is when you're imitating, you actually have this model that you're looking at, okay, and you're observing that behavior, and then at some other point in time, you're going to repeat that behavior. If it's an attitude towards particular groups of people, if it's a particular emotional response to an event, and you have a child watching how the parent is handling that, okay, it's likely that that child may show some of that, particularly if it's a pattern of behavior. So, you know, if mom, say, picks up the phone and is a certain way on the phone, or it reflects a certain attitude, and the child is observing this and observing this, it may be likely that when the child picks up the phone, you know, we wouldn't be surprised that the child actually repeats some of the same types of responses that we would hear the mother repeat. That would be something similar by modeling. So what we know about this through Albert Bandura's work is that consequences of others' behaviors does impact the person. So if I'm driving and I'm driving pretty fast, and I see this other guy in front of me, he's driving just as fast, he gets pulled over. Well, the idea there is that I'm going to slow down, because I don't want to be the next one getting pulled over. Seeing other people get reinforced or not get reinforced can impact what we do. And that's what Bandura found out. So it's not something that needs to happen directly to the person. Okay, so some of the principles here, we rehearse the model behavior symbolically. So it's something that we take in and we internalize. And then at some other time, we overtly, so we'll actually express the behavior. So whether it's, you know, a younger sibling that's, you know, copying their older sibling, or there's, you know, there's so many different scenarios with this. You know, there's students that mimic teachers, and typically what we know about it, if the results of the behavior, okay, again, if they're favorable or of value, we call them reinforcing, right? They're likely to repeat it. Okay, so that's very much like operant conditioning, right? You do a behavior, it's reinforced. Okay, so we can see that that's playing out here. The observer is likely to model behavior if the model is similar to them. This is what Bandura found out. So a child and a child, for example. Okay, if the model is similar to the observer, if the model is an admired status, so your school your preschool teacher, you know, modeling for the class, or a parent modeling for a child, somebody that's of some status, admired status, and the behavior actually has some value. Okay, so that makes it worth repeating. So those were some things that he noticed about the particular model. Been a lot of studies on observational learning. We do know that that exists. I think if you guys think about it, you can think of something that relates to yourself and how you may have learned something just by watching. A lot of studies in the area of aggression when it comes to observational learning, because there's a real concern in the field that, you know, kids particularly being exposed to aggression and violence. You know, and if it's particularly by people that maybe there's something here, have some type of status to them, are they going to then repeat this? There's a very famous study that was with Bobo the Clown that involved observational learning. I don't know if any of you remember that study, but that was in regards to aggression. And children were basically witnessing another child beat up this rubber clown. And they were just watching from another room, and then when they had a chance to go in the room, what was the first thing they did? Okay, so there was that premise that children learn that. Now again, we got to be careful with that, because does that mean every single thing that we're exposing kids to that they're going to go out and repeat? We haven't really seen that consistently. Okay, it really depends on the behavior itself. Depends on if the behavior is rewarded. Okay, and in that case, I think it may have been rewarded in the Bobo case, but that was a great example of aggression and how just watching aggression, how that could play out. So let's take a look at observational learning. Some examples, learning a skill set. So you can watch someone actually do it and repeat it. So you're watching your mom cooking a meal. You're just watching her. Okay, but that's something that, you know, would be of some functional value to you. It's reinforcing because you get to eat something good afterwards. Social skills, coping, behavioral and emotional responses to situations. I can't tell you how many times I've seen kids that, you know, will have a reaction to something. It seems like an overreaction, but then you watch their parents and you think, oh, now I get it, you know. Yeah, because the parent is just, you know, has this overreactivity to the event, and it seems like the kid pretty much just sort of watched them and does the same thing. And just like with operant and classical conditioning, adaptive and maladaptive behaviors here we're talking about can be imitated. So, you know, when we talked about child abuse prevention And if you remember, it was a pretty high number of individuals who experienced child abuse as kids. Okay, and so basically one of their primary models was physically abusive, verbally abusive, whatever it was, right? And so we would say that for that child, you know, a lot of that behavior was just learned. Okay. Now we don't want to excuse the behavior, there's still actions that should be taken, but we would look at it from that framework, is that it's learned. Alrighty. Now, what I'd like you to do is on your second card, write down a situation. Could be made up, totally made up, that's fine. It's not like I'm going to know one way or another. It could be personal, work-related, that comes to mind that relates to a behavior or behaviors that can be accounted for by one of the learning methods. So a behavior, it could be if it's a client that you're working with, but it could be accounted for by one of the learning methods. So either classical conditioned behavior that you think it is, observational learning, or operant conditioning.